Here to help us break down the major policy differences between the two parties is Representative Kevin Brady, the congressman serving the 8th District of Texas. So, Congressman, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight because in a couple days, the American people are going to be picking two very different directions of this country. And if, for example, in Congress, there is some negotiating that has to go along because, of course, Republicans do have the upper chamber, but that may be in jeopardy on November 3rd as well as the presidency. So I want to ask you, what is the threat posed, according to many Republicans, with the Democrat-controlled not only Congress, but White House as well?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that if Democrats take the White House and sweep Congress, our economy will slow. Paychecks will either stagnate or reduce somewhat because the Vice President Biden, we know his record in the White House. The Obama-Biden recovery was the weakest in our lifetimes. Paychecks were flat for more than a decade. Manufacturing jobs and companies were moving overseas. And when they were leaving office, most Americans still felt they were in a recession, and many economists felt we were sliding toward one. All that changed under President Trump, as you know, rebuilding now one of the strongest economies in our lifetimes. President Trump has a proven contrast and record of creating jobs, growing paychecks, bringing jobs back from overseas. So, boy, in this case, on the handling of the economy, especially coming out of a pandemic, I don't think there could be a starker contrast.
And coming out of this pandemic as well, that is the debate that's being had, is who is the best leader for an economic recovery? And I think that you bring up, for example, Joe Biden coming out of the 2008 recession. It was the most anemic recovery that we've seen since the Great Depression. And of course, before the coronavirus pandemic, President Trump did have one of the strongest economies in U.S. history in order to tout. But here we are, the coronavirus was much of a neutralizer on that front, and here we are in a very competitive presidential race. But the talk right now is on COVID relief. We know that the White House has been willing to at least expand what it was looking for in order to reach a negotiated deal with Democrats in the House. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell seems a little bit less willing to do so. Where do you stand on coronavirus relief? Are you on board with a $1.8 trillion package, or do you think that Republicans should be going more for that $500 billion that Senator McConnell put forward?
You know, I think it's really important we not go on a spending spree just to go on a spending spree. The truth of the matter is we do need another round of PPP, forgivable loans for small businesses. We do need help for airlines and other distressed industries that frankly won't recover until there's a vaccine and a more of a consumer confidence. And there is some work that we can do funding for hospitals, schools, and daycares, no question about it. But that is a small, targeted relief package. The Senate is really focused on that. That's really what this economy needs at this point.
And of course, there is still money from the CARES Act that has not been spent yet, too. And a lot of people are saying that perhaps we should spend that money first. And I think it's also worth noting, too, that there are a lot of businesses in this country that can't open right now because of state mandated lockdowns. I mean, we've talked to people, for example, that say, yeah, it would be great to get another $1,200 check or get another PPP cut, whatever it may be. But it doesn't go as far if I can't open up my business. I mean, at that point, it's money that's stagnant, not necessarily going anywhere. And I know that you have a proposal, H.R. 11, and it does try to facilitate economic growth, and it's something that you've recently put forward as well. Can you break down the elements of that? Because that could be another avenue to go down, correct?
It is. So House Republicans are really committed to restoring the American dream, rebuilding our economy, renewing, and returning to our way of life. Part of this is the Commitment to American Growth Act that we introduced. I and Leader Kevin McCarthy on behalf of House Republicans. It has three aims. One is to rebuild the pre-COVID economy, adding 10 million more jobs to the economy. Secondly, we want to make America medically independent and manufacturing independent from China, which means we'll develop those new medicines, medical supplies, and ingredients right here in the U.S. And then finally, we believe that America's economy can grow even faster than pre-COVID. We believe the Trump economy has even more growth to it. And so our goal is to make America the most innovative nation on the planet. That will drive jobs, research, manufacturing for the long term. So we're thinking beyond just the recovery. We see greater growth for the country ahead.
Now, of course, you're on the House Ways and Means Committee, so you do have a little bit more strength, I would say, in order to put this forward and hopefully get it through the House. But we know how politics works. We know that it's a divided Washington. We know that it's a divided Congress on that matter, let alone the fact that Democrats control the lower chamber at the moment. And everything you just said sounds excellent. I don't know how anybody could necessarily disagree with any of that, but do you suspect that there will be pushback based on politics?
Yeah, unfortunately, Alex, yes. Democrats seem just heck bent on raising taxes on families. Vice President Biden has said 8 times that he will repeal all of the Trump tax cuts. I don't know in good times why you would do that, but coming out of a pandemic, taking more out of the pockets of working families and local businesses makes no sense. And Democrats also want to raise taxes on our businesses that compete around the world. We know what happened then during the Obama-Biden years, which is we saw a flow of jobs and headquarters out of the United States. We don't want to go back to those bad old economic days.
And of course, the Biden campaign will say that they won't raise taxes for anyone that makes under $400,000. But logistically, I just don't understand how that works. You can't, for example, repeal part of a bill and not do the whole thing. And at the same time, that would be the act of Congress, not necessarily the president himself. So it's a little bit of a miscommunication, I think, on his part that just frankly doesn't make much sense. But I am glad to hear that there is progress being made for the American people on that front because, I mean, a lot of people are struggling right now. And I think that whether it's through growth, relief, whatever it may be, I'm glad to hear that there's at least a conversation being had on behalf of them. But Representative Kevin Brady, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight, explaining what's going on in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.